Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining me for this lecture on life energy and the SAF method. This is lecture number 1. We're going to be going over life energy, flow, and CPS, comfortable pressure and space. So bear with me while I work these slides. I have been working on getting this to flow as well as I can. We're going to be doing our first lecture on the basics of life energy and its operations. And then we'll be doing a 7-part series going through various aspects of life energy and the science of life energy and our use of SAF and how we can use SAF to help harness the life energy around us. So let's get started in our presentation today. I wanted to thank you for joining me. I'm your host, Nic Scogna, and over the next several sessions, we're going to explore a system of thought and wellness that has changed the way we understand ourselves, not just physically, but energetically, emotionally, and spiritually. This first lecture is titled Life Energy, Flow, and CPS. It's where our journey begins. We'll explore the nature of life energy, how it moves through us, what happens when that flow is disrupted, and how Joseph Scogna's self-awareness formulas gave us a method to observe and interpret its flow. Before we go further, let's talk about the origin of this work. Excuse me. Joseph R. Scogna Jr., my father, was the researcher and visionary behind the self-awareness formulas, or SAF. Some say SAF or SAFE, but we typically say SAF as it stands for self-awareness formulas. In the late 70s and early 80s, long before terms like bioenergetics or quantum wellness were widely being used, Joe was building a framework that connected our emotional experiences, physical states, and energetic patterns using math, color, sound, infrared sensors, and most of all, numbers. He was fascinated by light and energy, how they affected the human system, and how trauma could become locked into the organs and gland systems. He studied radiation studies. He wanted to see how these things would manifest as physical symptoms and emotional patterns. And he believed that every system in our body was not only connected, but capable of expressing a kind of energetic language, a language that SAF helps us interpret. Life is energy in motion. Every experience, emotion, and memory leaves an imprint in the field. So what do we mean by life energy? Life energy is the measurable dynamic force flowing through and around all living systems. It is the spark that gives form movement, the current that fuels our thinking, feeling, breathing, becoming. It exists in atoms and stars, trees, animals, and of course, we are part of that as well. It's not a metaphor. It's real. It's measurable, observable, and deeply personal. Every emotion we experience, of course, every thought we entertain, and every sensation we feel is part of this great current of life energy. Some call it chi, ki, prana, spirit, or vitality, but for our purposes, we'll refer to it simply as life energy. So SAF teaches us that this energy has structure, rhythm, and flow, and when the flow becomes disrupted through trauma, stress, toxic input, or unconscious habits, the body and mind will begin to signal that something is out of alignment. These signals are not random, they are messages waiting to be understood. Energy pressure is expressed as symptom, and SAF chain interpretation helps us resolve these distortions. Through this lens, we don't treat symptoms as problems to be silenced, but as signals to be heard. And that's what we'll explore today. What does life energy do? and what happens when it moves out of balance. We'll talk about the principle of CPS, comfortable pressure and space. It's a key to understanding how and why the body speaks in the language of discomfort and pain when energy flow is blocked. So let's begin with the first essential concept. And that will be flow and resistance, how pressure and blockage create symptoms. Life energy is always in motion, like water in a stream or electricity through a circuit. It's meant to move gracefully, rhythmically, and purposely. When that flow is smooth, we feel balanced. Our thoughts are clear, our emotions are calm, and our bodies function with ease. But when that flow is disrupted, we begin to feel the pressure. So what causes disruption? The answer would be resistance to flow. Now, resistance doesn't always mean something negative. In fact, a certain amount of resistance is necessary for growth and change. It's what helps us develop strength, character, and boundaries. But when resistance becomes excessive or chronic, when it's based on unresolved emotions, mental confusion, or environmental overload, then energy begins to stagnate, or worse, compress. In nutrionics, my dad explained that all energy expresses itself in forms of light, heat, electricity, and pressure. Our emotions are not just feelings, they are electric motions, or what he called emotions. This is an SAF term introduced by Joe to describe emotions' physical electric component. These are currents of energy. These are currents of energy that I'm sorry, I'm getting the wrong title here. These are currents of energy that will pass through the nervous system, imprinting on their way organs and glands, and signal the brain that there's flow, impedance, or resistance. And just like a traffic jam in a city, when too many signals get stuck in one place, everything slows down or explodes. Let's use an analogy. Picture a garden hose. When water flows freely, it nourishes the plants, goes where it needs to go. But if the hose gets kinked, pressure builds up. Eventually, either the water stops flowing out or completely bursts through the line in an uncontrolled way. That's what happens in the human system. When energy cannot flow through its natural channels, we experience symptoms. That could be physical discomfort, emotional outbursts, fatigue, anxiety, even spiritual disconnection. This is what SAF chains allow us to see, where the pressure has built. These are not random, these are messages. Now, modern culture often teaches us to ignore or suppress those messages. Take a pill, push through it, pretend it's not happening. But in doing so, we increase the internal pressure. We kink the hose even further. In SAF, we do the opposite. We listen. We ask, what is this symptom telling me? Where is the energy stuck? What was the original cause? And this brings us to the concept of comfortable pressure and space, or CPS, a key principle in understanding how life energy is meant to operate within us. But before we dive into CPS directly, let's anchor this idea of resistance a little deeper. Every time you ignore an emotion, suppress a memory, or override your body's signal, you create a little pocket of resistance. Over time, those pockets stack, and eventually you find yourself reacting to life from a place of stored tension that you may not even remember consciously. You might say, I don't know why I feel this way, or this pain came out of nowhere. But in the SAF system, we know that energy doesn't just disappear. It gets stored, encoded, held, until we're ready to release it. My dad believed that each organ and gland stores not just physical energy, but emotional and even spiritual imprints, memories and experiences coded in our DNA, layered with inherited traits and life experiences. These stores of energy can form what we call chains, sequences of energetic pressure that tie to a present-day complaint, usually why somebody's going to see somebody to get an SAF chain read, so they have some form of complaint that they're not sure exactly what the source is. And we can tie that back to a past event and the emotion that locked it in place, the initial vortex. The good news, once you become aware of these chains, once you see the pattern, you can begin to release the kink or the energy. Awareness is the key, and it starts with understanding when and how our life energy has deviated from its natural rhythm. So now let's look at the framework that Joe created to help us restore that rhythm, the balancing point, the natural equilibrium of the human system. Let's talk about CPS. Comfortable pressure and space is one of the most important ideas developed. It's both a guiding principle and a measuring stick for the flow of life energy in our lives. Let's go with a simple definition to start off. CPS is the natural balance point between pressure and space, between intensity and rest, effort and ease, action and stillness. You look at any dichotomy, CPS has pressure on one side and space on the other, and we're looking to find the equilibrium between the two. Most occurrences we find that we have too much pressure build, but there are plenty of occurrences when we have too much space. Something taken away from us is too much space. Maybe we were robbed, or we lost a loved one. That loss of something is a loss of pressure, and that would be something that we would look at to increase pressure to find balance. Replace that thing, basically. So you want to basically get in the zone with CPS. CPS is a perceptual and physiological baseline that determines how we respond to life's demands. But here's the thing. Most of us aren't there. We don't live in CPS. We overschedule, we overthink, we suppress emotions, we ignore signs from our body. And when we violate our CPS for too long, the body speaks, first in whispers, subtly, tension, fatigue, forgetfulness, then in shouts, pain, dysfunction, and ultimately collapse. So let's break that down. Let's see if I have my right title card here. CPS is basically the law of balance. Every living system, whether it's your body, your garden, or your solar system, operates under a law of balance. Too much pressure with too little space creates stress, burnout, and breakdown. Too much space with not enough pressure leads to stagnation, apathy, and even atrophy. CPS represents the sweet spot between these extremes. Now, pressure doesn't just mean stress. It refers to energetic demand, internal or external. It could be emotional pressure, mental workload, environmental toxins, unresolved trauma, or even spiritual crisis. And space is the room we give ourselves to process, to breathe, to restore. When you're within your CPS, your system has just the right amount of challenge and just the right amount of support. You move through life rather than fighting or avoiding it. What happens when CPS is violated? Well, that's where you start to get your signals. You'll start to get your symptoms and signals. So Joe used the analogy of a spring. Behind. And use the analogy of a spring. Imagine you compress a spring slowly, a little more each day. Compress, compress, compress. Eventually, the resistance becomes so great that the spring can't compress any further. Critical mass is reached. It begins to resist you, building pressure that has nowhere to go. Eventually, it either snaps back or breaks entirely. And I have gotten lost in my info cards. I kind of had a feeling that would happen. But, and we're going to see all this great stuff. So if you're taking notes, these are the notes that we should be taking. I tried to arrange all this, the most vital points. And there you go. And again, a lot of these quotes and items are coming off of a seminar from 1984, the Project ISIS seminar, and Nutrionics, the book that was published in 1980. So this information has been out and is available in other formats besides this lecture, but this is just another means some of us learn by discussion and hearing somebody talk about things. So that's where we go with that. Okay, so moving on. Your body and mind will work the same way in regards to pressure and space as the spring. Too much pressure, it builds up, you hit critical mass, and there has to be a change. When you live outside CPS for too long, whether it's through ignoring your needs, denying emotions, or staying in toxic patterns, you begin to build up internal pressure. The pressure must go somewhere, and it shows up as pain, confusion, disconnection, or symptoms that don't have a clear origin. And the pressure is not resolved or released through awareness. It forms stored charges in your body's organs and glands, what we later see in the SAF chains. Symptoms in the SAF framework are signals, not problems, not malfunctions, signals. They are warnings that CPS has been violated, and unresolved emotion is interfering with flow. Signals that say something inside me is not flowing. Signals that say I've been under too much pressure for too long, or I've had no space to reflect, process, integrate, etc. There's many different things that can basically be signaled from your body. A headache is a signal. There's a lot of different things. The pressure accumulates until the body creates a new reactor, a new internal chain of tension, memory, and emotion. And unless we recognize and release it, that chain begins to direct our choices, moods, and health from the shadows. If you ever have a dream and your whole day, the next day, is colored by the emotion or energetic emotion of that dream, that's similar in the more immediate. But these things happen when we were kids. We've had experiences and emotions that tied us back to when we were kids. And they influence us to this day. And is it appropriate? Is it correct? That's what we look to get to. So Joe taught that the violation of CPS could be traced, measured, even predicted using tools like infrared thermography and SAF questionnaires. But even without these tools, we can sense it. You know when you're in CPS, you know when something feels off. Your body knows, it's wise, and it's always signaling. CPS in practice, there is a method for us to utilize this without anything but ourself and our own consciousness. How do we return to CPS? First step would be to listen. Pay attention to your own rhythms. You honor the need for rest as much as the drive for progress. You recognize symptoms as messages, not interruptions. And you allow space for your emotions to move rather than shut them down. It's not always easy. We live in a culture that rewards pushing, numbing out, taking drugs, and always going faster. But your system doesn't care about external timelines. It wants harmony. It wants homeostasis. And it will get your attention one way or another. So the SAF method starts with awareness. It starts with saying, where in my life am I compressed? Where am I resisting flow? Where have I ignored the signal too long? These are the questions that bring you back to CPS. And that's why this principle sits at the heart of everything we'll discuss moving forward. Comfortable pressure and space is the lens through which we view symptoms, stories, and stuck energy. It is the measure of whether life energy is moving freely or whether it's calling out for change. Next, we're going to explore what happens when that energy is shaped by emotion, how electric motion becomes a driving force in your body, and how stored emotional charges affect the flow of your entire system. So we're going to move on to CPS and the electric motion of emotion. Now we got the cards landing right. Now that we understand the basics of what CPS is, comfortable pressure and space, equilibrium, as the natural balance of life energy within us, let's explore what happens when emotion enters the picture. Emotion is not just a feeling, it's energy in motion. Joe coined the term electric motion to describe what emotion truly is: a pulse of energy, a spark of current, a signal that flows through the nervous system and resonates. It will spark the organs and gland systems as well. Emotions are not abstract. They are measurable, physical, and real. They leave traces in the body, in the memory, and even in the energetic field around us. Make sure my title cards are moving forward. There we go. So how does this connect to comfortable pressure and space, these electric motions? When you experience a strong emotion, especially one that is denied, unexpressed, or suppressed, it doesn't just disappear. That emotional charge embeds itself somewhere. And somewhere is in your system. If the experience was overwhelming, traumatic, or unresolved, it locks in as a kind of static or pressure within your energetic circuitry. That pressure begins to violate CPS. The body can only hold so much emotional charge before it begins to express it physically. You might get a headache, digestive issue, tightness in your chest, recurring fatigue. These are not random complaints. They are expressions of a deeper energy pattern rooted in unresolved emotion. In the SAF system, we see this clearly when interpreting chains. There's always an anchor, the number that represents the emotion or event in the past that holds the pattern together. The anchor is like the verb of the sentence. It gives energy to the core issue and allows it to produce the present time complaint. For example, someone might be experiencing an upset stomach today. That's the lead in SAF language, but the core might point to an imbalance in the endocrine system. And the anchor might be an emotional trauma from the past, like guilt or betrayal. The moment that emotional charge is recognized and understood, the chain can release. The system no longer needs to hold on to the pattern. That's the power of electric motion. It explains why a conversation can make your heart race, why a memory from 30 years ago can cause you to be nauseous, why anger can raise your blood pressure. Emotion is electricity. Emotion is pressure. And when that pressure has nowhere to go, it begins to distort the flow of life energy. But there is a method. Awareness is discharge. That moment of recognition is rectification. The energetic release that SAF aims to achieve through interpretation. The moment you see the emotion clearly and understand its place in your pattern, you begin to dissolve its hold. That's the beauty of SAF. It doesn't require brute force, drugs, or repression. It asks for attention, interpretation, and space. It gives emotion a voice, not a label. And with that voice, the body begins to rebalance. CPS can be restored, and the electric motion that once caused chaos can become a flow again. Inflow. In our next section, we'll look more closely at the human body as a bioenergetic system, how it stores information, processes signals, and holds the key to its own balance through self-awareness. Excuse me. All right. So let's see if we can jump this ahead here. Bioenergetics. And again, I feel like I've lost my... Yeah, I did. Okay. It's on autoplay, so bear with me on these note cards. Sometimes they're getting ahead of me by quite a bit. So we are here. Okay. I will work on that for the next lecture. To truly understand how the SAF method works, we need to shift our perception of the body. Instead of viewing it as a mechanical machine made of isolated parts, we recognize it as a dynamic, living, bioenergetic system, one that constantly receives, processes, stores, and transmits energy. Everything you've experienced, every emotion, every thought, every environment you've been exposed to has left its imprint. Not just in your memory, but in your body. In SAF, we often say, your organs and glands remember what your conscious mind has forgotten. Nic Scogna believed that the human system operates much like a computer. You'll find a lot of that in nutrionics, the man and machine. The partnership between man and machine was the original subtitle on that. But far more advanced is the human system. Your DNA and RNA are like archival drives holding not just genetic traits, but emotional memories, learned behaviors, inherited tendencies, and coded instructions for how to survive life's pressures. These elements record inherited energetic imprints and environmental memory, not metaphorically, but energetically. Each organ and gland has its own energetic personality. They operate on unique frequencies, store specific types of emotional residue, and often act in pairs, what Joe called metabolic doubles, to communicate internally. These pairs tell us a story. They're trying to tell us a story. So they're signaling. The body is also equipped with sensors. Our cranial nerves, the endocrine system, the skin, they act like antennas. They're constantly picking up signals from within and without. And when these systems detect a violation of CPS or a buildup of unresolved emotion, they create a signal, what we experience as symptoms. This is the genius of the SAF numbering system. By using infrared readings or questionnaires, we can isolate which organ systems or gland systems are under stress, determine the emotional anchor, and trace the chain of events that led to a current imbalance. But without even using the system, you can begin to observe this in yourself. Where do you carry tension? Which body part feels numb, tight, overactive, or sluggish? Which recurring symptoms seem to show up when you're stressed or triggered? These aren't just physical glitches, they're encoded messages waiting to be read. We call SAF the Rosetta Stone of symptomatology for that reason, to decode the encoded messages, and they are to be understood within the SAF chains. The SAF chains help us decode by identifying stress systems and the sequence of energy and the emotion or memory that may be causing interference. The nervous system plays a central role here as well. It connects to the 12 cranial nerve pairs, what SAF describes as the 12 cylinders of expression, each tied to energetic circuits within the body. It functions like the wiring of your internal biocomputer. Make sure this title card goes the right way. There you go. When it becomes overloaded, underfed, or scrambled by emotional shock or trauma, it begins to short circuit. That's when confusion arises. That's when communication between organs and glands breaks down. That's when energy stops flowing and symptoms begin. But here's the key takeaway. Your body is always trying to return to balance. It wants to resolve. It wants to speak. And it is far more intelligent than we give it credit for, of course. The SAF method helps us reestablish the communication line between mind and body. It helps us hear what our system has been trying to say, often for years. And when you begin to speak your body's language through energy, number, memory, and emotion, everything changes. So next we'll put this into practice. The next section, we'll walk through some practical exercises that will help you begin to read your own energy and decode what your body is saying. Let's bring it all together. Okay, here's some real world examples, and we're going to also do a simple internal exercise that you can do now. We've established that the body is always speaking, that symptoms are signals, that emotion is electric motion, and that when we violate our natural balance, our comfortable pressure in space, we begin to accumulate pressure, and that pressure eventually has to express itself. Now, how do you begin to hear those signals? You don't need fancy equipment to start tuning in. You just need quiet attention and honest curiosity. Before interpretations, I'll often ask the sapient to think of their major complaint so as to charge it up. So when they're answering the questions in the questionnaires, they are feeling the relevance of their major complaint. So what we're going to do first is listen inward to begin identifying points of compression or suppressed signals. Let's do a short thought exercise together. You can do this seated, standing, lying down, or even when you're walking, whatever is most comfortable for you. Just bring your attention inward. Take a deep breath. In and out. Now scan your body, starting at the top of your head, moving down slowly. Where is there discomfort? Where is there tightness, heaviness, or sensation? Pause when you find something. It might be subtle. Tension in your jaw, a heaviness in your chest, a knot in your stomach. Wherever you feel it, gently place your focus there. Not to fix it, just to listen. Ask yourself, if this area could speak, what memory or emotion might be stored there? When did I first notice this? What might this sensation be holding on to? You don't need to know the answers right now. This isn't about solving. It's about listening. Awareness itself begins the process of rectification. Awareness says, I'm willing to understand. Sometimes a memory will surface, sometimes an emotion, sometimes just a feeling of spaciousness or relief. We're going to take another breath and gently bring your awareness back to the present moment. Now we'll ground this out with a few examples from real life. And, again, your results are going to be different. I always recommend everybody to go and get a clean bill of health from their doctor, or at the very least, know what you're up against by checking with your professional. A woman who was using SAF kept getting recurring throat issues. This was her major complaint: scratchy, tight, and inflammation in her throat. She discovered that her lead was the thyroid, the throat area. Her core is the heart. Number 2, denied love. And her anchor, 20, tied to an experience where she was silenced in her youth and couldn't laugh due to her father. Once she was able to connect those and reclaim the energy from the past, the physical symptoms in today began to dissipate. A man with recurring digestive issues with using SAF found that it wasn't a food issue or intolerance, but unresolved grief. His core is the suppressed laughter of pancreas, number 20. His lead is the stomach, his major complaint, and a feeling of being consumed. And the anchor was liver, sadness. He found that it was tied to the death of a grandparent, a memory there. By making space for himself to grieve and, again, connecting with the flow of energy, it moves forward, and his current situations, his current major complaint begins to dissipate. These are not metaphors. They are patterns. These are chains. And by recognizing them, the pressure begins to drop. The energy starts to flow again. You can begin doing this right now in your own life. Start by asking, where do I constantly feel tension? What does this remind me of? What needs to be said, expressed, or felt? Even this simple practice, this act of turning inward and listening, creates a shift. You're no longer just enduring symptoms or ignoring them. You're interpreting them. You're listening. You're transforming discomfort into dialogue. And that's what the SAF method is all about: creating a language to communicate with the deeper parts of yourself. In the final part of today's lecture, I'm going to summarize the key takeaways and set the stage for what's coming next in Lecture 2. So let's move on. And if you're taking notes, there we go again. I will have these title cards better for the next lecture. So summary and looking ahead. As we bring this to a close, let's take a moment to go over what we've processed and gone through. We began with the idea that life energy is real, flowing through every part of us: mind, body, and spirit, and emotion. We saw that when energy flows freely, we thrive, and when that flow is blocked, compressed, or confused, the body speaks to us through symptoms and signals. We introduced comfortable pressure and space, or CPS, as a natural point of energetic balance, and how its violation leads to resistance, tension, and eventually crisis. But we also learned that these challenges aren't problems to be feared. They are messages waiting to be understood. Symptoms are not flaws. They are energy patterns that form complete sequences, what we interpret through SAF chains, the sequences of energy. We explored emotion as electric motion and how unresolved feelings become stored charges in our system. And we examined the body not as a mechanical object, but as a bioenergetic computer, recording every experience, transmitting signals, and seeking equilibrium at all times. And finally, we practiced listening. We gave the body a moment to speak. We learned to ask, not what's wrong with me, but what is my energy trying to say? This is just the beginning. In our next lecture number 2, the structure of the human energy field, we'll dive into how energy patterns form and flow throughout the body, how external forces shape our inner terrain, and how the electromagnetic spectrum and elemental imbalances influence our wellness on every level. You'll also begin to see how the SAF system organizes these energetic messages through numbers, giving us an intuitive yet precise map of our own internal world. Between now and then, I encourage you to pay attention to the subtle signals your body gives you. Notice where you feel expansion and where you feel compression. Begin the dialogue, because when you listen to your body, you're listening to your energy. And when you listen to your energy, you begin the process of transformation. And again, we do have all this information in our books. You can find those at lifeenergypublications.com. I invite you to follow our channel, SAF Training, on YouTube, where we'll be posting these lectures 1 through 7. Thank you for joining me today for Life Energy, Flow, and CPS. And I will get these wonderful, wonderful cards all fixed up next time, so I hopefully won't have to cue them myself. Here's your key takeaways. Again, if you're taking notes, these are the notes that I've arranged for this lecture. Awareness is the beginning of rectification. Once you understand the message, the energy begins to move. And that is the core of our concepts. And again, this is Nic Scogna signing off. Until next time, my friends, be well.